Chapter 9. The Echo. The Puerto Rican jungle pressed close, its air thick with humidity and the drone of cicadas. Rosa sat in a cramped shack, its tin roof creaking under the weight of a restless night, the walls lined with peeling paint and faded photographs of a family she barely recognized. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows across a wooden table where Elias's notebook lay, its sodden pages splayed, the spirals glowing faintly green, their chaotic loops a map to a reality she couldn't unsee, didn't want to believe. Her hands trembled, her dark hair tangled, her eyes red from tears and sleepless nights, her heart heavy with the memory of Elias on the beach. His spiraling pupils, his glowing marks, his raving laughter. They're in us now. The notebook was all she had left, a relic of the astronomer, the dreamer, the man who'd chased stars and been claimed by the deep. As she turned its pages, her flashlight's beam catching the spiral's pulse, her mind drifted to his time in the ship, piecing together fragmented visions from his ravings, his notes, his truth. Other ships, other worlds, the old one's shadow. A horror that wasn't just his but hers, now, undeniable, inescapable. The shack smelled of damp wood and salt, a faint tang that reminded her of the sea, the beach, the waves curling with spirals, tightening alive. Outside, the jungle hummed, its leaves rustling, its shadows shifting, as if the trench's glow lingered, watching, waiting. Rosa's fingers brushed the notebook's cover, its edges curling like the chamber's walls, a relic that wasn't paper but something else, claimed, changed by the system, the core, the god. The spirals pulsed, faint but insistent, a rhythm that wasn't hers but Elias's, the seas, the truths, a connection to a network that spanned galaxies, voids, time itself. She opened it, her breath catching, the pages heavy, sodden, the ink running like blood, the words, galaxies, trenches, awakening, smeared, replaced by loops, curves, patterns that glowed, alive, a language she didn't know but felt, a truth she didn't want but couldn't escape. Her flashlight flickered, its beam weak, trembling, as if the notebook's glow was draining it, claiming it, rewriting it, just as it had Elias. Her mind slipped unbidden to his ravings on the beach, his voice raw, his eyes spiraling, his words a cascade of horror and awe. The mother in the deep, Rosa, she showed me, seeds, scouts, spirals, other ships, other worlds, the old one's shadow, waking to reset everything, eternal, indifferent, alive. She saw him now, in her mind's eye, stumbling through the alien ship, its tunnels twisting, their translucent walls pulsing with green-veined light, the breathable liquid filling his lungs, sustaining him in a reality that wasn't human but alive. The flashlight's beam caught a page, a sketch, spirals tightening, surrounding a shape that wasn't a ship but a seed, its surface rippling, its veins threading into the cosmos, a fragment of a system older than Earth, older than time. Rosa's heart raced, her hands trembling, her eyes fixed on the spirals, their glow flaring, as if responding to her touch, her fear, her brother's truth. Rosa's sob broke, a sound swallowed by the jungle's hum, the shack's creak, the notebook's glow. She stared at the page, the sketch of the sphere, its spirals tightening, surrounded by notes in Elias's hand. Other ships, other worlds, seeds in trenches, scouts in skies, old one's shadow, waking, eternal, indifferent, alive. Her hands trembled, her flashlight flickering, its beam catching the spiral's pulse, their glow flaring, as if responding to her touch, her fear, this truth. She saw him in the ship, stumbling through tunnels, his eyes spiraling, his notebook filling with visions, his mind fracturing under the weight of a system that didn't need his name, his proof, his soul. The jungle pressed closer, its drone sharpening, its shadows shifting, as if the trench's glow lingered, watching, waiting, claiming. She turned the page, her breath catching, the spirals glowing brighter, a sketch of a trench, not Earth's but another's, its depths pulsing with green light, its walls veined with filaments, its core a seed alive, birthing scouts that streaked into a sky not blue but violet, their lenses pulsing, their spirals tightening, a system working, eternal, indifferent, alive. The words beside it smeared frantic. They're everywhere, Rosa, in every sea, every star, every void. The old ones don't sleep, they wait, their shadows spiral, their truth resets, where nothing specks, signals claimed. Her heart raced, her eyes wet, her mind reeling, rejecting, yet seeing, knowing, fearing. The notebook wasn't just Elias's. It was the system's, the core's, the gods, a relic that marked her, claimed her, pulled her into a truth that wasn't hers but was now, undeniable, inescapable. The shack's bulb flickered, the shadows dancing, the jungle's drone a chant, a pulse, a whisper, not human but alive, echoing Elias's ravings, the notebook's glow, the sea's spirals. Rosa whispered, "Elias," her voice breaking, a plea, a prayer, a goodbye, her hands clutching the notebook, its spirals pulsing, a connection to a brother who was no longer hers, a witness to a truth that wasn't human but cosmic, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked, eternal, indifferent, alive. The flashlight died, the bulb dimmed, and the spirals glowed brighter, a sign, a summons, a god. As Rosa sat alone, the notebook open, the jungle watching, the truth pulsing, eternal, indifferent, alive. Chapter 10. The Asylum. San Juan's crumbling asylum loomed under a bruised August sky in 1976, its concrete walls stained with salt and neglect, its iron gates rusted, creaking in the humid breeze that carried the faint tang of the sea. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and despair, the corridors narrow, their tiles cracked, their fluorescent lights flickering, casting jagged shadows that seemed to curl, spiral alive. Elias Marrow sat in a padded cell, its walls scarred with fresh scratches, his hands trembling, his nails bloodied from carving spirals into the plaster, their loops tightening, glowing faintly green in his mind's eye, a mirror to the truth he carried. A system of seeds, scouts, and old ones, eternal, indifferent, alive. His denim shirt was gone, replaced by a threadbare hospital gown, his gray-streaked beard matted, his eyes spiraling inward, their pupils curling like the waves he'd seen, the core's claim, the god's presence. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, dismissed as delusional, he muttered about eggs in the stars, his voice raw, a chant that wasn't his but the system's, a truth that broke him, marked him, made him its own. The doctors watched, their clipboards heavy with notes, their eyes cold, blind to the spirals, the truth, the God that pulsed in his bones, his words, his soul. The cell was a box, 10 by 10, its padding torn, its plaster exposed, the spirals Elias carved not random but precise, a map, a vow, a language he didn't know but felt, a connection to the trench, the structure, the core that had claimed him. The walls seemed to breathe, their scratches pulsing faintly, not with light but with intent, a rhythm that wasn't the asylum's but the system's, the seas, the gods. A single bulb hung overhead, its light weak, flickering, casting shadows that danced, curled, spiraled, as if the cell was no longer concrete but gelatinous, alive, a fragment of the ship's tunnels, the chamber's veins, the core's glow. Elias sat cross-legged on the floor, his gown slipping, revealing forearms etched with spirals, not tattoos but marks, faint now, yet alive, pulsing with his heartbeat, the chant's whisper, the truth's weight. His notebook was gone, confiscated, locked away, but its spirals lived in his mind, his hands, his eyes, a relic he didn't need to hold, a truth he couldn't unsee, didn't want to escape. He muttered, his voice low, raw, a cadence that wasn't human but alive. Eggs in the stars, seeds in the trenches, scouts in the skies, spirals everywhere, waking, watching, waiting, eternal, indifferent, alive. The words spilled unbidden, a prayer, a curse, a vow, echoing in the cell, swallowed by the wall's scratches, the bulb's flicker, the asylum's hum. His hands moved, nails scraping plaster, carving another spiral, its loops tightening, its curves precise, a pattern that wasn't his but the core's, the god's, a map to a reality that wasn't human but cosmic, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked. The doctors, peering through a small, barred window, scribbled notes, their pens scratching, their voices clipped clinical, dismissing him as delusional, a man lost to madness, blind to the truth that pulsed in his spirals, his mutterings, his soul. Schizophrenia, acute, auditory and visual hallucinations. One wrote, his glasses glinting, his face a mask of certainty, ignorance, fear. Elias laughed, a jagged, unhinged sound, echoing in the cell, a scientist seeing the universe's indifference and finding it absurd, profound, true. Eggs in the stars, he rasped, his eyes spiraling, fixed on the wall, the spiral he'd carved, its loops glowing faintly in his mind, a beacon, a summons, a god. Not hallucinations, not madness, truth. Seeds planted eons ago, in trenches, in voids, in stars. Scouts watching, harvesting, waiting for the old ones to wake, to reset, to spiral everything into their truth, eternal, indifferent, alive. His nails dug deeper, plaster crumbling, blood streaking his fingers, the spiral tightening, alive, a connection to the ship, the core, the system that had marked him, claimed him, broken him. The doctors flinched, their pens pausing, their eyes narrowing, but they didn't see, didn't know, didn't want the truth that pulsed in his words, his spirals, his soul. The cell's door clanged, heavy iron, a sound that wasn't the asylum's but the ship's, the hatches, the trenches, a rhythm that shook Elias's bones, his heart, his mind. An orderly entered, his face weathered, his hands gloved, his tray holding a syringe, its needle glinting, a tool to dull, to silence, to erase. "Time for your meds, Marrow," he said, his voice flat, his eyes avoiding Elias's, their spiraling pupils, their glow, their truth. Elias didn't move, his hands still scraping, his mutterings unbroken. Eggs in the stars, seeds in the trenches, scouts in the skies, spirals everywhere, waking, watching, waiting, eternal, indifferent, alive. The orderly hesitated, his tray shaking, his gloves creaking, his fear a faint echo of the fisherman's, the abuela's warnings, the island's old stories of Luz del Abismo. The light that claimed men, marked them, broke them. But he stepped forward, his boots scuffing the floor, his syringe raised, a weapon against a truth he didn't see, didn't know, didn't want. Elias's laugh surged, sharp, unhinged, swallowing the orderly's steps, the syringe's glint, the bulb's flicker. "You can't drug it away," he rasped, his eyes spiraling, his hands pausing, the spiral complete, its loops glowing faintly in his mind, a map, a vow, a god. "The truth's in the stars, the trenches, the spirals, in me, in you, in everything. The old ones don't sleep, they wait, their shadows spiral, their truth resets, where nothing, specks, signals claimed." The orderly froze, his syringe hovering, his eyes darting to the wall, the spiral, its loops tightening, as if alive, pulsing, watching. He muttered a prayer, soft, Spanish, a plea to La Virgin, his hands trembling, his fear sharpening, a man facing a truth he didn't want, couldn't bear. But he lunged, the syringe plunging into Elias's arm, the liquid cold, heavy, a tide to dull, to silence, to erase. Elias didn't flinch, his eyes spiraling, his smile breaking, a scientist seeing the needle's futility, the drug's lie, the asylum's ignorance. The liquid spread, a chill in his veins, but the spirals pulsed, alive, untouched, a rhythm that wasn't his but the core's, the gods', a connection to a network that didn't need his body, his mind, his life. He muttered, his voice fading, raw. Eggs in the stars, seeds in the trenches, scouts in the skies, spirals everywhere, waking, watching, waiting, eternal, indifferent, alive. The orderly stepped back, his tray clattering, his gloves stained with plaster dust, blood, fear, his eyes wide, seeing nothing, knowing nothing, fearing everything. The door clanged shut, the lock grinding, the cell sealing, a box, a tomb, a fragment of the ship's tunnels, the chamber's veins, the core's glow. Elias slumped, his hands falling, the spiral complete, its loops glowing faintly in his mind, a beacon, a summons, a god. The drug clouded his thoughts, a fog that wasn't silence but static, a hum that wasn't the asylums but the systems, the seas, the gods. His eyes, spiraling, fixed on the wall, the spiral he'd carved, its loops tightening, alive, a map to a reality that wasn't human but cosmic, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked, eternal, indifferent, alive. The doctor's voices drifted through the window, clipped, clinical, delusional, fixated, unresponsive to treatment. Their pens scratching, their clipboards heavy, their ignorance a wall, a lie, a fear. But Elias laughed, a soft, broken sound, swallowed by the cell's padding, the bulb's flicker, the spiral's pulse, a scientist broken by a truth that didn't need his proof, his name, his soul. His fingers traced the spiral on the wall, its plaster rough, its loops warm, alive, a connection to the trench, the structure, the core that had marked him, claimed him, broken him. He muttered, his voice a whisper, raw. Eggs in the stars, seeds in the trenches, scouts in the skies, spirals everywhere, waking, watching, waiting, eternal, indifferent, alive. The words were a prayer, a curse, a vow, a truth that pulsed in his bones, his spirals, his soul, a reality that wasn't human but cosmic, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked, eternal, indifferent, alive. The cell seemed to breathe, its walls pulsing, its shadows curling, spiraling, a fragment of the ship, the chamber, the god watching, waiting, claiming. Elias's eyes, spiraling, closed, his smile fading, his heart racing, the truth unbroken, undeniable, inescapable, as the spirals pulsed, the chant whispered, and the god woke, eternal, indifferent, alive. The San Juan Asylum's corridors reeked of bleach and decay, their cracked tiles reflecting the flicker of dying fluorescence, casting shadows that curled, spiraled, alive, as if the building itself echoed the truth Elias Marrow carried. A system of seeds, scouts, and old ones, eternal, indifferent, alive. Rosa stood outside his padded cell, her hands trembling, clutching his notebook, its sodden pages heavy, their glowing spirals faint but insistent, a relic of the astronomer, the dreamer, the man claimed by the deep. Her dark hair clung to her sweat-damp neck, her eyes red from sleepless nights, her heart torn between belief and fear, love and loss, the memory of Elias on the beach, his spiraling pupils, his glowing marks, his raving laughter. They're in us now. The notebook was a weight, a truth, a curse, its spirals pulsing in her hands, a map to a reality she didn't want but couldn't unsee, as she noticed, with growing dread, spirals in her dreams, subtle but growing, tightening, alive. She'd come to see him, to save him, to understand him, but the asylum's walls, the doctor's cold eyes, the notebook's glow pressed against her, whispering a truth that wasn't hers but was now undeniable, inescapable. The corridor was narrow, its air thick with mildew and despair, the distant moans of patience. A nurse, her face weary, her uniform starched, led Rosa to the cell, her keys jangling, her eyes avoiding the notebook, its faint green glow, its spirals tightening, as if she sensed its weight, its truth, its claim. "He's worse today," she said, her voice low, flat, her hands steady but her fear sharp. Rosa nodded, her throat tight, her hands clutching the notebook, its spirals pulsing, warm, alive, a connection to Elias, the trench, the core, the god that had fractured him, marked him, made him its own. The cell's door loomed, iron, rusted, its barred window small, dark, a portal to a man she no longer recognized. The nurse unlocked the door, its clang heavy, final, a sound that shook Rosa's bones, her heart, her soul. She stepped inside, the air colder, heavier, the padded walls scarred with spirals, their loops tightening, scratched deep into the plaster, glowing faintly in her mind's eye, a map, a vow, a language that wasn't Elias's but the system's, the core's, the gods. Elias sat on the floor, cross-legged, his hospital gown slipping, revealing forearms etched with spirals, not tattoos but marks, faint now, yet alive, pulsing with his heartbeat, the chant's whisper, the truth's weight. His gray-streaked beard was matted, his eyes spiraling inward, their pupils curling like the waves, the core's claim, the god's presence. He muttered, his voice raw, low. Eggs in the stars, seeds in the trenches, scouts in the skies, spirals everywhere, waking, watching, waiting, eternal, indifferent, alive. Rosa's breath caught, her hands trembling, the notebook heavy, its spirals glowing brighter, as if responding to Elias's voice, the cell's pulse, the god's presence. She knelt beside him, her jeans scuffing the floor, her eyes searching his, hoping for a spark of the man she'd known. The man who'd taught constellations, laughed over coffee, dreamed of stars. "Elias," she whispered, her voice breaking, a plea, a prayer, a call to a man who was no longer hers, a ghost marked by the deep. "It's me, Rosa. I brought your notebook. I need to understand. What happened to you? What did you see?" She held out the notebook, its pages splaying, the spirals glowing, a relic, a truth, a weight that anchored her to him, to the trench, to a reality she didn't want but couldn't escape. Elias's laugh surged, jagged, unhinged, echoing in the cell, swallowing Rosa's voice, the notebook's glow, the asylum's hum. "They're in us now," he rasped, his eyes spiraling, fixed on the notebook, its spirals tightening, alive, a beacon, a summons, a god. "The mother, the system, the old ones, they're not out there, Rosa. They're in the sea, the sky, the stars, in us. Spirals, marks, truths. We're not even ants, just signals, data, specks in a cycle that's waking, eternal, indifferent, alive." His hands reached for the notebook, trembling, bloodied from carving spirals, his nails caked with plaster dust, his fingers brushing the pages, the spirals flaring, as if responding to his touch, his truth, his claim. Rosa flinched, her hands pulling back, her heart racing, her mind torn. Part of her believed him, saw the spirals, felt the truth. Part feared he was lost, mad, gone. She saw them, in her dreams, subtle but growing, spirals curling in the corners of her mind, tightening, alive, not nightmares but visions, fragments of what Elias had seen, green-lit trenches, liquid metal scouts, skies thick with disks, their lenses watching, waiting, harvesting. She'd woken last night, her sheets damp, her hands trembling, her eyes searching the dark, expecting spirals, marks, truths, a reality that wasn't hers but was now, undeniable, inescapable. The notebook's glow pulsed, warm, alive, a connection to Elias, the trench, the core, the god, and she wondered, with growing dread, if it was claiming her, marking her, pulling her into his truth, his cycle, his ruin. "Elias," she said, her voice steadier, sharper, a sister fighting for her brother, for herself, for a world that didn't know, didn't care. "Tell me what you saw. The ship, the trench, the mother. I need to know. I'm seeing things too, spirals, in my dreams. Help me understand." His eyes, spiraling, met hers briefly, a flicker of the brother she'd known, the astronomer, the dreamer, but it faded, drowned by the core's claim, the god's presence, the truth's weight. He laughed again, a choking sound, his hands clutching the notebook, its spirals glowing brighter, a relic, a vow, a truth he'd carry, no matter what it cost. You see them, he whispered, his voice raw, his smile breaking. A scientist seeing the universe's indifference and finding it absurd, profound, true. The spirals, Rosa, they're in you too. The mother showed me. Seeds in trenches, scouts in skies, eggs in stars, a network older than time, waking to reset everything. Not with fire, but with silence. A cycle that doesn't care, doesn't judge, just works, eternal, indifferent, alive. His fingers traced the notebook's spirals, their glow flaring, as if the system was writing itself through him, through her, through everything. Rosa's sob broke, a sound swallowed by the cell's padding, the spiral's pulse, the god's indifference. She grabbed his hand, her fingers brushing the spirals on his skin, their glow warm, alive, a barrier she couldn't cross, a truth she couldn't share. You're not making sense, Elias, she said, her voice trembling, tears streaking her face, her heart torn between belief and fear, love and loss. You're here, you're alive, we can fix this. Come back to me. Whatever you saw, it's over. But his laugh surged, sharp, unhinged, echoing over the cell, the notebook, the spirals, a sound that wasn't joy but fracture. A scientist broken by a truth that didn't need his proof, his name, his soul. Over? He rasped, his eyes spiraling, his hands clutching the notebook, its spirals glowing, a relic, a vow, a truth. It's never over, Rosa. They're in us, spirals, marks, truths. The mother's in the deep, in the sea, in you. Look at your dreams, Rosa. Look at them. She froze, her hands trembling, her eyes darting to the notebook, its spirals tightening, alive, a mirror to the dreams she'd seen. Greenlit trenches, liquid metal scouts, skies thick with disks, their spirals curling, watching, waiting. She saw them, subtle but growing, in the corners of her mind, her sleep, her reality, a truth that wasn't hers but was now, undeniable, inescapable. The cell seemed to breathe, its walls pulsing, its spirals glowing faintly, a fragment of the ship, the chamber, the god, watching, waiting, claiming. Rosa's heart raced, her breath shallow, her mind reeling, rejecting, yet seeing, knowing, fearing. She believed him, part of her, a part that saw the spirals, felt the truth, knew the god, but another part feared a truth she couldn't bear. The nurse's voice cut through, sharp, impatient. Time's up, Senora, her keys jangling, her eyes avoiding the notebook, its glow, its spirals, her fear a wall, a lie, a refusal. Rosa stood, her hands trembling, leaving the notebook, its spirals pulsing, a connection to Elias, the trench, the core, the god. I'll come back, she whispered, her voice breaking, a plea, a prayer, a goodbye, her eyes wet, her heart heavy with grief, fear, love. Elias's laugh faded, his eyes spiraling, his smile breaking, his spirals glowing, a vow to a god he'd met. The door clanged shut, the lock grinding, the cell sealing. Rosa stood in the corridor, the notebook heavy, its spirals pulsing, a relic, a truth, a weight that marked her, claimed her, pulled her into a reality she didn't want but couldn't escape. The spirals in her dreams, subtle but growing, curled in her mind, tightening, alive, a sign, a summons, a god. As the asylum's walls watched, the fluorescence flickered, and the truth pulsed, eternal, indifferent, alive. The San Juan Asylum's interrogation room was a cold, oppressive cube, its concrete walls slick with damp. Elias sat shackled to a rusted metal chair, its bolts creaking, his hospital gown slipping to reveal forearms etched with spirals, their faint green glow pulsing with his heartbeat, the chance whisper, the god's presence. His gray-streaked beard was matted, his eyes spiraling inward, pupils twisting like the waves he'd seen, the core's claim, a truth that fractured him, marked him, made him its own. Across a scarred table sat Agent Carter, his gray suit crisp but his face strained, his eyes glinting with a mix of authority and unease, a man chasing answers he didn't truly want. His questions cut sharp, demanding details about the trench, the ship, the lights in the sea, his voice a blade honed by years of burying truths. Elias laughed, a jagged, unhinged sound, his voice raw, his smile breaking as he scratched a spiral into his arm, its lines bleeding, glowing faintly in his mind's eye, a vow to a god that wasn't human but cosmic, eternal, indifferent, alive. You'll see them soon, he rasped, his words a prophecy, a curse, a truth that pulsed in the room, the spirals, the god. The air was thick with mildew and tension, Carter's cologne a thin mask over the asylum's decay, the room's walls seeming to tighten, their shadows curling, spiraling, alive. A single bulb hung overhead, its harsh light flickering, casting jagged patterns across the table, where a manila folder lay, stuffed with reports, sightings, signals, the 1969 tape, Elias's notebook, its spirals glowing in Carter's memory, a relic he'd locked away but couldn't erase. Carter's pen tapped a nervous rhythm, betraying the calm of his tailored suit, his clipped voice, his government badge. He was a man of cover-ups, his career a graveyard of anomalies. Roswell, Rendlesham, lights over Puerto Rico. Each buried with lies, but this one bled, spiraled, refused to stay dead. "Marrow," he said, his voice low, edged with steel. "No more games. Tell me about the trench. The structure, what is it? Where is it? What happened to Rojas? We've got your tape, your notes, the sightings. Talk, or you're here forever." Elias's laugh erupted, sharp, unhinged, filling the room, drowning Carter's voice, the pen's tap, the bulb's flicker. "You'll see them soon," he rasped, his eyes spiraling, piercing Carter, seeing through him to the sea, the trench, the core, a reality that wasn't human but cosmic, a cycle that didn't care, didn't judge, just worked. His shackled hands twitched, nails digging into his arm, scratching a spiral, its lines raw, bleeding, glowing faintly green in his mind, a map, a vow, a language not his but the system's, the core's, the gods. Blood dripped slow, red, staining his gown, a sacrifice to a truth that needed no proof, no name, no soul. Carter's face tightened, his pen freezing, his eyes flicking to the spiral, the blood, the glow, a crack in his mask revealing fear. A man who'd buried truths but felt this one rising, curling, alive. "Stop that," he snapped, his voice unsteady, his hand gripping the folder, its pages trembling, sketches of disks, signals, spirals threatening to spill. Elias's smile broke, a scientist seeing the universe's indifference and finding it absurd, profound, true. "Rojas?" he whispered, his voice raw, his eyes spiraling, fixed on Carter through him to the void. "Gone, fled, taken, dissolved, it doesn't matter. The mother claimed him, or the spirals did, or the sea. You're chasing shadows, Carter, thinking it's a ship, a weapon, a secret you can lock away. It's not. It's a system, a seed, planted eons ago, growing scouts' eyes, harvesting data for the old ones, waking to reset everything, eternal, indifferent, alive." His nails scraped deeper, the spiral tightening, blood pooling, glowing faintly in his mind, a beacon, a summons, a god. Carter's hand slammed the table, the folder jumping, pages spilling, transcripts of the chant, photos of green lights, Elias's notebook, its spirals pulsing, a relic, a truth, a weight that marked this room, this moment, this man. "Enough," Carter growled, his voice rising, his control fraying. A man who'd silenced witnesses but felt this truth slipping, spiraling. "You're not helping yourself, Marrow. We know something's down there, lights, signals, objects. You were in it, you saw it. Tell me what it is, where it is, or you'll rot here, drugged, forgotten, erased." He leaned forward, his breath sharp, his cologne fading, his fear sharpening. A man who'd read reports of disks over Arecibo, signals from the deep, shadows in the sea, anomalies that didn't fit, didn't lie, didn't die. Elias's laugh surged again, a choking sound, his eyes spiraling, his hands twitching, the spiral on his arm bleeding, glowing, a connection to the trench, the structure, the core that had claimed him, marked him, broken him. "Erased?" he rasped, his smile breaking, his voice raw. "You can't erase it, Carter. The mother's in the deep, in the stars, in us, spirals, marks, truths. You've seen the lights, the signals, haven't you? In your files, your dreams." Carter's face paled, his hand twitching, the folder slipping, his eyes darting to the spiral, the blood, the glow, a flicker of recognition, fear, truth breaking through his mask. He'd seen the reports, green lights over Puerto Rico, disks in Nevada, signals from the trench, a ledger of anomalies that haunted his sleep, curled in his dreams, spiraled, alive. "You're insane," he said, his voice unsteady, his hands gathering the folder, its pages trembling, the spirals glowing faintly, a relic, a truth, a weight that marked him, claimed him, pulled him into a reality he didn't want but couldn't escape. Elias's laugh surged, sharp, unhinged, echoing over the room, the table, the spirals, a sound that wasn't joy but fracture. A scientist broken by a truth that didn't need his proof, his name, his soul. "Insane," he whispered, his eyes spiraling, his smile breaking. "The mother showed me. Seeds in trenches, scouts in skies, eggs in stars, a network waking to spiral everything into their truth, eternal, indifferent, alive." The room seemed to pulse, its walls tightening, shadows curling, spiraling, a fragment of the ship's tunnels, the chamber's veins, the core's glow. The bulb flickered, its light weakening, as if the spiral's pulse drained it, claimed it, rewrote it, just as it had Elias. Carter stood, his chair scraping, his face pale, his mask shattered, a man who'd buried truths but felt this one rising, tightening, alive. "You're done, Marrow," he said, his voice hollow, his hands clutching the folder, its pages trembling, the spirals glowing. A truth he couldn't bury, couldn't silence, couldn't escape. Elias's laugh faded, his eyes spiraling, his hands still, the spiral on his arm bleeding, glowing, a vow to a god he'd met. "You'll see them soon," he whispered, his voice raw, his smile breaking, a prophecy, a curse, a truth that pulsed in his bones, his spirals, his soul. An orderly entered, his face blank, his tray holding a syringe, its needle glinting, a tool to dull, to silence, to erase. "Time's up," he said, his voice flat, his eyes avoiding Elias's, their spiraling pupils, their glow, their truth. Carter stepped back, his folder clutched tight, his breath shallow, his fear sharp, a man fleeing a reality he couldn't control, couldn't bury, couldn't escape. The orderly approached, the syringe raised, its liquid cold, heavy, a tide to quiet the truth, the spirals, the god. Elias didn't flinch, his eyes spiraling, his smile breaking, the needle piercing, the liquid spreading, a chill in his veins, but the spirals pulsed, alive, untouched. A rhythm that wasn't his but the core's, the god's, a connection to a network that didn't need his body, his mind, his life. "You'll see them soon," he rasped, his voice fading, raw, his hands shackled, the spiral on his arm bleeding, glowing, a beacon, a summons, a god. The orderly stepped back, his tray clattering, his eyes wide, seeing nothing, knowing nothing, fearing everything. Carter turned, his boots scuffing, his folder trembling, his eyes avoiding Elias's, their spiraling pupils, their glow, their truth. A man marked by a truth that wasn't his but was now, undeniable, inescapable. The door clanged open, then shut, the lock grinding, the room ceiling, a box, a tomb, a fragment of the ship's tunnels, the chamber's veins, the core's glow. Elias slumped, his eyes spiraling, his smile fading, the spiral on his arm bleeding, glowing.